Hello, this is Braden Deal, and today I thought it might be good to go through an experiment that I was doing with trying to combine different percussion libraries and just honestly hone my skills as far as production and mixing goes and stuff like that to achieve a certain percussive sound. Any of us who do this kind of work, and if you do, hopefully you're listening to as much material as you're trying to produce. It's good to listen to other people's work, even for different purposes. Like sometimes you'll listen to certain scores, and your takeaways will be more in the realm of the harmonies utilized and the arrangement. And sometimes you'll listen to certain scores and maybe the harmonies are really simple and they're not necessarily striking to you, but what is striking is the production quality and the way they're utilizing different sounds and mixing certain sounds. And there's different things to glean from different sources and soundtracks and scores and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is a session where I was trying to achieve a particular kind of sort of like a hybrid percussive, it's sort of like a hybrid orchestral percussion thing. As you can hear, this is kind of on the epic side. And it's got some natural kind of sounding orchestral type drums. It's not super electronic, but there are hybrid sources that I'm using and blending to try to achieve a certain like big epic sound. And this was a session I was experimenting with that with. I'm going to kind of walk you through the different things that I'm using in order to achieve the sound. And hopefully this sparks some ideas from you when you go to make your own kind of percussive sections for your music. And also, who knows, maybe somebody in the comments can recommend some tips along these lines that I can use and implement in my own workflow to improve things. But anyway, I'll kind of play you through what I have here. It's just a little like 4-bar section that loops and has all these different parts working together. Let's hear what that sounds like, and then I'll start to break it down. Okay, so that's the part. That's what it sounds like. Let's go through one thing at a time from the foundation and upward. So I've got 3 sections here, as you can see, that are kind of working together. I've got what I call my hits, which are like my main hits, as you can kind of see here from the MIDI. These are a little bit more spaced out. And these sound like this. And then my rhythm section sounds like this. These hits are a little bit more syncopated and fast. And then I have these kind of what I call my transitional sort of roll sounds, which are mainly used to kind of, swell and used as a transition between every 2 bars or so, and they kind of swell and come up in this rolling kind of technique that is just I'll play you without it. There's nothing wrong without it. But with it, I find that it kind of imbues it with, it just gives it a bit more grandeur and epicness. And with it, that sounds like this. So you can hear these transitional parts. really kind of swell and are just good for creating scale and thickening up the sound, and also just kind of used as a simple transitional effect, which subconsciously can kind of trigger, okay, we're moving to this different section. Anyway, so those are my 3 sections. Let's start one at a time, looking at some of these elements. Let's start with this main. I'm utilizing a couple different libraries here. As I said before, this was kind of an experiment of like which libraries work well together in order to achieve this particular sound that I'm going for, which I was, referencing the whole time I was doing this. And I'm utilizing things from a couple different libraries. You don't have to have these libraries in order to achieve this sound. Let me say that up top. What you do need to do is have a collection of a couple different libraries. It helps to have variety. And I would definitely recommend the libraries that I'll show here that I'm utilizing, but it doesn't have to be that specific one. What you do want to have is a diversity of libraries as far as percussion goes. And then what you want to do is spend time getting to know those libraries and getting to know what makes them tick and where they really excel. So like in this particular case, this first patch that I'm utilizing for the main hits is a sample from Ferrum, the trailer percussion library from Keep Forest. Really good if you're doing trailer stuff, but it's also good for hybrid stuff. And this particular sound is very, as you'll hear, it's kind of more of a hybrid sound. It's on the kind of organic side of things. It's not like terribly electronic, but it does have a sort of heightened hybrid quality to it. And it has a great transient impact that I thought would serve as a good foundation for my main hits. So you can hear that transient and that punch and that low end and that almost kind of crunchy quality to it is something I am using to kind of cut through the rest of the patches that I'm utilizing for the hits. The next one I'm using is a sample from Damage 2. Some low ensemble hits there, and some of these I'll go through the mixing, some of the light mixing I did on these patches. There's actually no EQ on many of the ones from these main hits, and they may have benefited from some EQ and some compression, but in this experiment, I just happened to not utilize any. Sometimes you don't need to. Sometimes if you combine enough sounds together to achieve a certain sound, you'll find that maybe, you don't necessarily need as much EQ as you thought. So, kind of assemble all your elements first, and then sort of look at the big picture and see if you think some individual parts could benefit from some EQ. The next thing I'm doing here in the main hits is using these Mahler hammers from Cineperc, from Cinesamples. A couple things to bring up here as we're going through these. So one, with each section, you want to consider a few things. Now, as you'll hear, as we're going through these parts I'm using for the main hits, there are some differences in terms of the closeness or the depth, perceived depth or space of the different samples that I'm utilizing. And it's important to keep that in mind if you're going for a big epic sound, and this is something I'm still working on being able to achieve. But you, in my experience, want to have a variety of different samples. As I've said, you want to pull from different sources, but it's not only about, oh, I need a sample from this library and I need a sample from that library and I need to, stack those and combine them and that'll get me a big sound. You also want to consider the inherent, as I said, depth and impact and characteristics of the different samples. So for, going back to this first one that we use from Ferrum, that's got some space on it. It's got some reverb, but generally speaking, it's pretty close sounding. It doesn't sound very distant in terms of perceived depth. That transient attack and those upper harmonics in the high end, generally speaking, this is a pretty close sounding sample compared to this. On the Mahler hammers, you can hear there's a lot more perceived depth. It sounds like we're listening to percussion being played further back in the imaginary 3D space that we are working in. And having a variety of close sounding and far sounding samples and balancing those appropriately is one of the things I think that can lend itself well to achieving and a big epic sound. So you can hear, and these Damage 2 hits are somewhere in the middle. There's a lot more space than the first sample we kind of looked at, but more space than that, less space than the Mahler hammers. And so it goes back to what I was saying, that you want to have a kind of diversity of not just libraries but samples from those libraries that utilize the 3D space in different ways and achieve various things. And you can hear together so far getting a certain sound. If we take out those Mahler hammers, kind of toggle those in and out, the sound sounds like it's getting closer to us. There's less perceived depth, and then we take out one of the other layers. Whoa, all of a sudden that space and perceived depth is much more limited. So sorry, I know we're barely into the rest of the samples here, but really just want to drive that point home of why you're choosing certain samples and to kind of think about that as you're assembling different parts. So I've got another patch from Damage 2 here that I'm using for some bass drums. Very spacey, and along this point, experiment with. Damage 2 is fantastic in that it gives you these different depth parameters where you can move things farther away or move things up close. Perhaps I'll make another video on this in the future, but maybe there is, especially with libraries like this that give you a lot of flexibility and control over the depth. And the sound of the sound. Maybe it's a combination of, maybe I can take this sample and layer one version of it that's kind of, farther back, and then another version of it that's a lot closer. And also, we haven't even talked about velocity, experimenting with different velocities. Most of these, I'm assuming, these velocities are maxed out. So these are, loud hits that I'm utilizing. But something I didn't utilize in this experiment that I've utilized elsewhere is combining different velocities. So having, one sample that's really played really loudly and another version of that sample that's played quieter. That's a much more, this is a lot different than this. But if we, kind of crank that up in volume and have the volume relatively evenly matched of the low velocities and the high velocities, there's a lot of potential there. So anyway, just something to think about. And then the last patch I'm utilizing for the main hits is the Surdos from Cineperc. And I am doing a decent amount of mixing on these. This is what they sound like without any processing. Really like the sound of these, and they've got a great snap, and I'm utilizing these for their high end specifically to get that kind of transient snap, so that everything's to help the main hits kind of cut through the mix a little bit more. But I did some processing to further accentuate that snap, and really to kind of like isolate it as part of this sample's main job here. So without the EQ, with the EQ, big difference. Doesn't sound like such a big, beefy, Surdo ensemble anymore, but you'll hear in the context of the main hits, that's okay. We don't need, we have 4 different patches achieving the low end, kind of roundness, punch, weight of this section. We don't need the Surdos for that. We're using these for the high end. So filtering out, as I did here, up to 200, and doing a little bit of cutting of mud and boosting some high end. That's helping accentuate that characteristic of it, and then also using the clariphonic to crank quite a bit of this particular setting. So without. With just kind of giving it a boost in that high end. And now I'll play all the hits together in context, and I'll toggle off and on the processing I have for these Surdos here. So you can hear that processing is kind of helping this particular patch achieve the job of imbuing this section and this percussive part with more snap, and I'll do with and without. It's okay without it, but as you will hear in context with everything else, it really helps those main hits to kind of cut through the rest of the rhythmic drums, which we will get to now. And this brings to mind another thing to kind of think about when you're designing different parts for different percussive elements. These main hits, as we said, are a lot more spaced out and less syncopated and quick than the rhythmic parts. And because of that, I'm going to tailor the release time of each sample accordingly. So these first hits, before they get to the space between each hit is a lot greater, so the release time can be a lot greater than the rhythmic parts. Whereas the rhythmic parts, you're going to want to tailor your release times, be it through editing in the in the sampler, and in most cases contact, or maybe doing some transient designing on the length of the transient, whatever it is, however you do it, you're going to want to focus on those release times and kind of pay attention to those. And another thing you're going to want to do is pay attention to frequencies in terms of like you want to think about what is the job of this particular patch, and like we were talking about with the Certos, the job is to have a lot of like high-end snaps. So we took this low end out because we don't need it. It's muddying things up, and other elements in our session here are doing that job of providing that low end weight. And so that job's already being done. So we're giving this patch a different job and treating it accordingly. And I won't go too much in depth on this, but you'll see with some of these, like this first patch in particular, let's talk about this. These are the taikos from Damage 2. Now, as you can hear, like I was saying with release time, I'll just increase the release time so you can hear how it kind of muddies things up when it's not as tight as it was. Okay, that makes a big difference. Those releases kind of, laying over on top of each other and almost creating this kind of like muddying delay, or too much reverb effect. It almost sounds like you're going to want to play with that decay release time. And also, let's look at just in this instance, and I'm doing it in the instance of a couple of other patches here in the rhythms, but without this processing here, the taikos sound like this. And that's fine. But what I wanted to do is kind of control that low end a little bit more, because my main low end from these hits, from the main hits that we already talked about, that's kind of the core of the low end. That's doing that job as far as the low end goes, and the rhythmic part, the syncopated rhythmic part of the percussion, low end is less important. There needs to be some, because then it won't sound like a drum anymore. It's gotta sound, it's gotta still have some weight to it, just less so than the main hits, which are, giving more of that low end impact. There's a lot of low end there, so I need to control the low end from my rhythmic parts, because what these are doing is kind of supporting the main low end hits in a different way. Anyway, blah, blah, blah. So this first plugin I have on the taikos, I'm utilizing a technique of downward expansion. So essentially I'm, let's just see it in action here. Without it, with it, you can just hear some of that low end kind of rumbly, sub frequency is lessened and controlled through this technique. And basically, using the Fab Filter Pro MB, taking this band down, setting it to expansion, quick attack, quick release, and have some other high ratio and some other settings. But basically, I'm utilizing this to trigger this band such that it will go up and bring in that low end on the specific attack of the drum whenever that's there. And the small space in between the hits, it's going to suck that low end back down and out of the sound, such that it's going to kind of ebb and flow a little bit more. It's going to breathe a little bit more, and it'll have less of that low, rumbly characteristic to it. That's that frequency that we want to control in this particular part. Do you have to do this on all of these? No, not necessarily. Depends on the sample you're using, depends on the inherent quality of the sound. And taking out some mud, basic stuff. All right, let's speed things up a little bit and go through these a little bit more quickly. So I'm utilizing some taikos. I'm utilizing some more, again, on the kind of like organic hybrid blend of style of percussion. I'm utilizing some patches from Devastator Breakout Pro from Keep Forest. Keep Forest has great libraries for percussion, as you can see. Really love these rubber drums. Now, as I said, these sound kind of weird and like almost a little bit more on the electronic side of things, and don't sound like a natural kind of, taiko being played in a studio or what have you. But as we'll hear, they have a close kind of quality to them, a close kind of crunchy transient quality to them, as do these close organic taikos from the same library. Got a little bit more snap to them, and we're taking out, a lot of low end, because we have the low end job being accomplished by other patches, as we said previously. So yeah, these sound kind of different and less organic and natural, but as you'll hear in the context of everything, they make quite a difference. Also utilizing some patches from Strikeforce, which is a great, kind of like epic percussion library. Taking out low end, not a ton, but a decent amount. Doing that on this patch as well from Strikeforce. And this patch. And then finally on the last two bars of the section here, I have another instance of Ferrum, which is these super snares, which are fantastic for trailer music, yes, but also kind of just like they have this crisp top end to them. They've got some great low end punch too, but I'm taking that out and just utilizing them for that crisp kind of and quality that they have, and I have them on just a couple bars here so that there's some variety between these first two bars and the second. So let's listen to the rhythmic section all together. So you can hear on that last two bars that crispiness, and that could be used as a good accent or a kind of effect of increasing tension and intensity in the section. And let's take out the Devastator Breakout Pro sort of hybrid sounds and then bring those back in, and you can hear exactly what those are doing. Again, it's all about that blend of close sounding, far sounding, organic, non-organic, depends on the sound you're going for, but that balance is critical for getting a kind of big epic sound. These Strikeforce drums they've got quite a decent attack to them, and these also, similar to Damage 2, have you can sort of blend. It's really fantastic. You can affect the ADSR of the close mix and the far mix independently, and also blend the overall balance of the close to far mics. So you can take that into account. They've got quite a bit of snap to them. It's just a different quality than these drums. These are much more closer and kind of dry sounding. They still have some reverb, there's some depth to everything. It's just about a balance and diversity of all these different qualities that we're talking about. Okay, let's finish this up here with the transitional section. I'm utilizing some wave files here. As you can see, I kind of bounced out some things so that I could time it appropriately to the session here. This first one is a patch from Cineperc, from the bass drums and crash patch. They've got some really cool, like, big transitional rolls. That's got a great, you can hear that click because I don't have a crossfade on this, but that's okay. Really great low end to this, which will kind of sing over the rest of the, there's the main low end, and then there's this kind of transitional low end element. It's going to roll over everything and just kind of, provide this sort of nice, almost like a crash cymbal. This is like what I think of as like the hypothetical crash cymbal of the percussion section. It gives this kind of, sweeping, swelling quality that's really nice. So we've got this low end file. We've got this other element from Ferrum. Little different, little crunchy. And then we've got these taiko rolls, which I really like. This is from, I believe, 8Dio's Hybrid Tools Volume 2. They've got some great taiko rolls in that volume that are really big and epic sounding and have quite the like crisp high-end quality to them. And I'll play you without the EQ first. Really big and epic sounding. I'm using this other element as more of low end quality, so I took the low end out of this taiko roll sample and utilize it for its high end. So everything together, and you can hear without this low end element, still sounds like that kind of rolling, sort of swelling crash percussive sound that we're going for, but it loses a lot of that weight with this low end element. Just gives it this, big sound. And then without this kind of high element taiko sound, still effective, but with it in context of everything versus without it, gives it a lot more of that crash feel. So once again, I'll kind of toggle these in and out. And there you have it. There's a breakdown of that kind of epic percussive part that I was working on. Hopefully you get something out of this. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.